I'm just really curious what your perspective is from someone not in South Dakota looking at this and what your thoughts are and what you think it's important for us to know.
Yeah. So from my outside perspective, I look at it from two different ways. I look at it from a tribal perspective and also from a law or legal perspective, since I'm an attorney. On the tribal side, to me, that's a tribe exercising their sovereign rights or sovereignty. Even though they ruled long ago that tribes are dependent nations within a nation, we still have inherent tribal sovereignty, and we exercise that to the maximum possible, with the exception of whenever Congress steps in and abrogates our sovereignty, or whenever the Supreme Court makes a ruling on a case involving uh, any statutory laws that Congress has passed. Um, so from that standpoint of view, I mean, I can understand why the tribes are going the direction they are. I think I've read where she's, I don't want to use the word fabricated, but it's almost kind of what it sounds like whenever she talks about some of the cartels that she claims are operating on some of the reservations, and that's not allowing her, not allowing the state to protect all the tribe or all the Native Americans that are on those reservations. Whether or not that's true, I mean, you can't say. I mean, I think there was one, what do you call them? Not a not a club, but a gang. I call it the Ghost Dancers gang, where and kids being kids, I mean, they're going to try to come up with different names or whatever, whether or not that's true. But, are they at the level of a cartel, as she claims? I highly doubt it. But then again, I mean, that's why many tribes have their own law enforcement or BIA law enforcement on their reservations, which is to take care of those things. They don't need the state to come in and save them uh, every time they think they need to be saved. So, from a legal perspective, there's a totally different route we have to look out after, and we have to look at the ramifications that something like this, of how this could affect all tribes across the country, especially with the current Supreme Court that we have, right? I mean, it's a very, very, very conservative court that we have compared to a liberal court. And if you look at all the favorable case law that have benefited Native American tribes, a lot of it came during Justice Marshall's term back in the 70s, where we had the Indian Child Welfare Act that was passed, I think, in 1978. You had the can't think of all the different laws right now, but there was a lot of key ones that were passed back during that time. The Self-Determination Act that was passed in the 70s as well, and all those other laws. You look at the Supreme Court ruling where they upheld the rights of Native American tribes to have Indian preference. That went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, and it was upheld on the fact, and we've kind of hinged on that ruling for the last 3 decades, and that tribes are not a race, we're a political class, right? And it goes back to that Indian preference case from back in the 70s. Whenever they made the ruling on the Indian Child Welfare Act last year, it hinged on the thing that tribes are a political class and not race-based, which is what they're trying to, which is what the petitioners had filed to try to get it ruled unconstitutional. So when you look at that perspective, you have to look at, what ramifications could come out of banning a governor from part of the lands that are within the state that she governs or they govern. Are you going to cause Congress to try to come in and intervene and abrogate what little tribal sovereignty it seems that we have left? Or are you going to cause South Dakota to start filing in their district courts and the federal courts to try to work their way to the Supreme Court in hopes of getting a favorable ruling from an ultra-conservative court from an ultra-conservative governor? So, and if you look at Oklahoma, that's basically what happened to us. Whenever the McGirt ruling came down in 2020, and it ruled that the Muskogee Creek Nation Reservation had never been disestablished. And then, that follows suit with Cherokee Nation's reservation was never disestablished. Choctaws wasn't, Creeks wasn't, Seminoles wasn't. And so now almost the entire part of eastern Oklahoma is still considered a reservation because of that ruling that came down from the Supreme Court. So what happened then? Governor Stitt goes crazy. And his new appointed attorney general, I think his name was John O'Connor, started filing all these cases in the United States Supreme Court. 45, in fact, I believe is how many he filed, with the hopes of getting either McGirt to be overturned, which is kind of crazy if you're going to get the same court to overturn the ruling that they had just handed down. But he filed all these different ones, and one of them stuck, right? And it was that Castro Huerta case. And out of Castro Huerta comes a ruling that the state has the right to prosecute non-Indians on tribal land. Now, the ruling had always been for the last previous 200 years is that either tribes or the federal government prosecute. Well, the federal government prosecutes non-Indians for any major crimes that occur on Indian land. Castro Huerta kind of said, no, there's Congress never specifically abrogated states from doing that. They've always had that right, which just goes against all the other decades, if a couple hundred years of precedents before that. So from that stance, that perspective, we have to be careful of what cases may end up in the Supreme Court, because with the conservative Supreme Court, you never know how they're going to rule. And I will say that whenever Brackeen versus Holland was being litigated, I mean, I don't know if you know of any Indian tribes that felt confident that ICWA was not going to be ruled unconstitutional overturned, because at all the NCAI conferences that we've gone to, all the other larger meetings, all the meetings here with tribal leaders here in Oklahoma, everybody thought that it was going to be ruled unconstitutional, and that if that happened, it was going to cause everything else to fall, including IGRA, any other, because you could claim that all of them are race-based. Now, I think the reason why it took the Supreme Court so long to finally come out with their opinion and order is because they knew that if they ruled the other way, that's exactly what would happen. And then what do you do? All of Title 25, U.S. Title 25 would go away. So you got to look at that perspective, and you look at the tribal sovereignty perspective, and you have to weigh the two. Unfortunately, I don't think there is a right answer.
Yeah.
Are you concerned about what could play out here and how it could affect Oklahoma and other reservations nationwide?
I'm concerned from the fact that, that if Governor Noem, if she's anything like Governor Kevin Stitt, that she'll start having her own legal counsel, her own general counsel, or if her attorney general agrees with her perspective, that they could start filing a lot of lawsuits within their own district courts, or trying to go directly to the Supreme Court. And unfortunately, if they have that type of feelings, I don't want to use the word hatred because that's a strong word, but that's what it seems like sometimes. But if they have those type of ill feelings against Native American tribes, and they don't believe tribes should have these rights and this rights, or they shouldn't have this and they shouldn't have that, they will use their power and their resources to do those things. And that's why here in Oklahoma, which is exactly why former Attorney General John O'Connor filed 45 cases in the United States Supreme Court. To me, it was an abuse of power and abuse of resources, but that's what his directive was from the Oklahoma governor.
What would you like to say to your relatives in South Dakota in this position that they're in right now?
I would continue to do what you're doing, to exercise your tribal sovereignty to the max, because our tribal sovereignty is inherent, meaning that we had our tribal sovereignty before the United States was the United States. This is our homeland. That's their homeland in South Dakota. We're not going anywhere. We were here long before the people came over from Europe, and we're going to be here long afterwards. So exercise your tribal sovereignty, stick with what you believe, continue to teach your children, your grandchildren, all your cultural and your language, because that's who we are as Native American people. You know, there's a lot that I could say, but you know, sometimes I have to be careful with what I say. I just don't like it whenever people take things out of context, you know, and a lot of my social media things that I say, like on TikTok, a lot of that is done because of the Oklahoma governor taking things out of context. And even though Congress, even though our United States Supreme Court has ruled that tribes are a political class, he continues to say that things are race based. Even though our top court and our Congress has said otherwise, he continues to say just the opposite, even after those things come out. And you know, it's like he's preaching to his choir. You know, I'm not sure what benefit that is to him or to the people. He's supposedly an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation, which a lot of people has found very odd that he has taken on the role of an Andrew Jackson type governor, despite the fact that him and his family, his siblings, his kids are all enrolled in the Cherokee Nation. But yeah, I just don't like whenever people take things out of context like that. To me, it's damaging if you're claiming to be a leader and you want to be a leader that wants to pull, as he says, all 4 million Oklahomans together. Then do that, but don't intentionally cause division just because this case didn't go your way or you didn't get this ruling that went your way. Don't intentionally cause division and cause more division, because that's what he's doing. And I don't know if how much you follow him or follow Oklahoma or not, but a month or two ago, he introduced, I don't know what it was, a proposal to the Oklahoma Horse Racing Commission about the gaming compact that I can't believe it's already been almost 5 years. But in another 10 or 11 years, we're going to be back in the same situation with our gaming compact renewal. So he introduced a proposal to the Oklahoma Horse Racing Commission, asking them 10 years from now to vote against the gaming compact renewal. And we're just like, my God, are you serious? You hate the fact that you lost so much that now you're wanting to try to control and dictate things 10 years down the road when you're no longer going to be in office. Thank goodness that Oklahoma governors are limited to 2 terms. He's in his 2nd term. So after these next 2.5 years, he's not going to be governor anymore. He's not going to be governor whenever the next gaming compact negotiation comes around. But the Oklahoma Horse Racing Commission met on that last week, and they said, no, we're not going to make any decisions on something that's not going to happen for another 10 years down the road. So I was very happy to hear that, very happy to hear that there are some organizations here in Oklahoma that still make sense.
I don't have the direct quote, but I saw something that Governor Noem just said in the last couple of days, perhaps over the weekend. And she said something to the effect of all of my tribes in South Dakota. And I thought, that kind of reminds me of when President Bush was calling Saddam Hussein he was mispronouncing it, knowing it was going to get under his skin. And I thought, is this kind of the equivalent here with the governor saying my tribes in South Dakota? Have you experienced anything like that, or do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I did see that quote, and I thought that was interesting how she phrased that as well. And I'm familiar with Bush calling Saddam Sodom. But I think on a similar level, we've seen Governor Stitt make references, and he's even put out little commercials and things like that saying, you know, we can't have Oklahoma operating off of 2 sets of rules, and he'll have like Oklahoma rules and he'll have tribal rules, and he's used like the speed limit miles per hour as an example. You know, he put like Oklahoma 55 miles an hour, tribes 75 miles per hour, which is, that's a misquote. That's completely wrong and inaccurate. And to me, does nothing but cause division. He had made a similar quote that I think may have gotten under the skins of some tribal leaders, where he said, I'm the governor for all 4 million Oklahomans. Kind of implying that he's a czar over the tribal leaders, which is really odd considering the names of some of those tribal leaders and what some of them have been able to accomplish despite all the limitations that come with being a sovereign nation. So, and I say limitations because tribes are not on parity with not even local governments, especially when it comes to taxing or taxing authority, or even the right to prosecute non-Indians on their own land, right? And to me, Governor Stitt is always harping on safety issues, and I think Governor Noem may be trying to utilize the whole safety issue as her argument when she talks about cartels and other things like that may be operating on reservations. Well, then advocate to Congress and tell them to come up with the Oliphant fix, right? Because it was a Supreme Court ruling in 1978, I think it was, that ruled that Native American tribes do not have the authority to prosecute non-Indians on their own tribe. So if there's people that know that law or know that court ruling, and they think they can go to a reservation and operate and do some of the things they do because they know that the Native American tribes can't prosecute them, then they're going to try to exploit that. So is that our fault? No, that's not Native American tribes' fault. That's the United States Supreme Court ruling fault. But Congress has the authority to fix that, and they have not. So if we want to talk about, Oklahoma or any other state operating off of two sets of rules, yes, we are. The rule is that we can't prosecute anybody else other than Native Americans on our own land for criminal activity. Whereas you go into a little local community, even a tiny town of say 100 people that has to happen to have one law enforcement, that guy can arrest anybody that goes to his land if they're operating, if they're doing anything criminal. But Native American tribes can't. So let's fix that.
One last question. Any cartels on the reservations in Oklahoma?
Not that I'm aware of. And, if you know anything about like some of the Oklahoma tribes, especially the ones who have had their reservations deemed to be intact, like Cherokee Nation or Chickasaw Nation, they have all ramped up their law enforcement big time. Not only their law enforcement, but also their judiciary, by hiring more judges, by hiring more attorney general personnel, people or prosecutors. I think Cherokee Nation, whenever McGirt first got ruled on and they got their reservation deemed intact, their law enforcement budget like more than tripled the following year. So they took that responsibility head on, with their light horsemen that the Chickasaw Nation has and Muskogee Creek, and they do very well. So do I think there's any cartels operating? Not more so than all the meth labs and anywhere else that's operating on non-reservation land. So
I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so very much.
you're welcome.